So today on the preservation coffee break, we were going to talk about substitute materials, which has kind of been the theme of the week. That was our blog theme, and I think Laura posted a video of me talking about substitute materials several years ago on Facebook. But substitute materials are not a new concept. They actually have found that they use some substitute materials at Mount Vernon to simulate more expensive stone. They took the wood and actually put sand on it. We saw them redoing the process when we were there a few years ago.
Oh, for the fake.
Yeah, they were making fake stone out of wood so that they could, like make it look like. So it's not a new process. Sometimes if you use the wrong substitute material, it can take away from the architecture of the building. It can cause damage, and then sometimes it can make it more new material than original material. So that's why we try to, keep as much of the original fabric, the historic fabric, as we can. But there are benefits to using substitute materials. They can be cost effective if they're an accurate reproduction of the historic materials that they're replacing, and if they last a reasonable amount of time. Because if you get something that's not going to last very long, it's not worth it either. Now, when you're thinking about like the substitute materials and the substitute materials and the historic fabric, it should be your last choice. The times that I tend to default to them are when they're up high, things that are up high that nobody's going to touch, and it's a harder maintenance item, because then you're at least keeping the appearance of the building rather than. Do you agree with me on that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because nobody's going to see it, you can't touch it.
Right. Yeah.
And so
yeah.
it's one of them things. The further away you get from something, the better it looks.
Yeah.
So
but you do want to make sure that you consult with qualified contractors and that they understand what options are available. Substitute materials can be used when the historic material is not available, and there are times that there are historic materials that are not available. Like King of Prussia marble, they were quarrying that outside of Philadelphia, using
at the King of Prussia, where the mall is.
Yeah.
If that was the quarry, you can only get that stone from.
Using it on all the houses in Society Hill. Well, then before Society Hill went through its renaissance, somebody went through and pulled all the King of Prussia marble mantles and fronts out of it. So now you can't restore with that unless you buy it salvaged. So there's a whole, and I've seen some beautiful salvaged King of Prussia marble. It actually looks like blue cheese. Mm-hmm. But if it's not available, you have to make an option. If you can't find skilled artisans, ornamental work is probably the hardest thing to find a skilled artisan, and somebody who does like the gilding or the carving, some of those more artistic endeavors. Sometimes the original building material was not good. And one example of that's the brownstones in New York. That material was not a high quality stone, even though those are beautiful buildings. It's soft, it crumbles, it starts flaking off, 10 to 20 years after it's been installed. It's just not a good material. So if the original material wasn't good, you need to obviously make improvements so that you're not dealing with your building eroding. So, and sometimes the original materials were incompatible. A lot of times that happens with metal reactivity. That's typically when I think of seeing it. Can you think of another time?
Let's see.
Oh, wood and concrete.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot of times where they would just take like a floor joist and stick it in a pocket of a stone building or something. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, if we do that same technique, we wrap it in like rubber or something, so it gives a protection from the wood sitting moisture on any type of like concrete, masonry, mortar. That way it doesn't cause the chemical reaction and cause it to deteriorate as fast.
Yeah. The other time that substitute materials are often used, and we use them, is if we're reinforcing and it's not going to be seen like it's going to be recovered. And that's a compromise too with the building code. So you're putting LVLs in or something that can be rated easily by the engineer, but nobody's ever going to see it.
Yep.
you want to make sure that if you're going to put a substitute material in, that it's something that has a track record. It's not something that just came out and you don't have experience with it. You haven't heard other people have experience with it, because that's, you don't want to be the guinea pig. There were a lot of substitute materials that came out in the 90s that had a lot of lawsuits. The synthetic slates, the original decking, like the composite decking, those were like flaking away. There was a lot of, they were really trying to push all these synthetic material or substitute materials and synthetic, and they were not durable. It's gotten better, but I don't usually tend to encourage replacing something that's been there for 100 years if you can repair it. And drive it.
Or the American version, drive it.
The American version of synthetic stucco. The European version stayed okay, but they didn't modify their
base materials for it.
Yeah, so. They didn't modify the recipe. So substitute materials should match the appearance of the historic materials in color, texture, finish. So that, if somebody's looking at it, they can't just look right away and tell. I tend to be a person that can tell, but I think that's just because of what we do. We were at a traditional building, preservation trades. They were having like a pub crawl through Charleston, West Virginia, and they had Independence Hall there. And they were like, and it was their Independence Hall when they broke away from Virginia. and we walked in, and I said, "This is all reproduction glass." And they're like, "Yes, it is. How did you know?" I said, "Because all the patterns are the same. Real glass doesn't look like this." And they were probably tired of having me on the tour. So, but it needs to match the physical material, so that if there is interaction with the old and the new, that's a problem with a lot of epoxies. If you get an epoxy, like the epoxy we were talking about before we started recording, we tend to use the PC Woody, and they have wood fibers in the epoxy, so it expands and contracts with the wood. If you use like a epoxy for fiberglass, it won't do that, and it'll just pop out. So knowing what the materials and what the repair will do when you're if it's incompatible or not, or if there's going to be corrosion. And then it needs to, we kind of talked about that, but it needs to perform over time. It needs to last, because the reason most people choose substitute materials is so that it will
last for a while.
It will last for a while and not be a maintenance issue. And, typically if it's something that's going to have to be repaired or, replaced, because typically those items cannot be repaired. They can only be replaced.
And the minimum amount of time that we will even look at something would be 10 years.
Yeah.
Because at that point, you can, by 10 years, you can see if somebody's going to have how many issues they're going to have with it. Like if somebody's going to try to lawsuit them to death, or right. Then you can see right away. You can go like, oh, these are their problems. We know that's not what we're trying to do. Let's not use it for that. So
that's kind of substitute materials in a nutshell. And we talked about that a little bit with the things, the bases that you want to have remade. And I'm thinking, if they can do like an AZAC, and I don't know what the chemical name is, it's poly something, it's a plastic. If they can do that, I think that's probably your best option if you're going to go with the substitute material. Do you agree? Because it's machinable, but it won't have. Yeah. So that would be my advice. If you have any other questions or need anything else, let me know, and I can do some more research.
Okay.
So okay, well, very good. Thanks for coming on and sharing your stuff with us.
Yep. You want a question now?
Do I want what?
You want a question now?
Oh, sure. I'm ready. You can ask me a question.
We had a leak, a plumbing leak at our house earlier this year. We had to open up some walls to fix the leak, and I discovered that under my second floor, it's being held up by steel beams. And I didn't expect to see steel in a
No.
house built in 1902.
Yeah, 1902. Hmm.
So I just wondered if that is unusual or when
That is unusual. I was going to ask you when the house was built, and do you think it always had a bathroom, or do you think the bathroom was retrofitted?
No, it may well have been there for a long time.
Well, the reason I'm asking is if they had to, so oftentimes where we see structural problems is the colonial houses were built without bathrooms.
Yeah.
The Victorians started putting bathrooms in, and so any houses after that, they started retrofitting. Now in Lancaster and on the East Coast, those retrofits were going on, well into the 20th century. And they would often cut joists just to put the plumbing in. And then you start to have the sagging and things. That's when we start to see the structural problems. So I was just wondering if maybe the bathroom wasn't put in 1902. It's kind of on that edge. And then when they put the bathroom in to reinforce, they put the steel beams in. I don't know, but that's my initial guess. But it is unusual.
Yeah. The bathroom has a concrete floor.
Yeah. Well, they reinforced. Somebody reinforced to put that concrete floor in. That would be my guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you would need the steel to pour the
because
concrete.
the ceiling is coffered, and that's and so the steel beams come down into that. So it's been there since original.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me.
Yeah.
Is the floor concrete just for the tile, or was the heating system in it?
I don't know.
Okay.
Because
that's a little bit of a mystery, but yeah, I'm guessing the steel beams were there for the concrete reinforcement then.
Yeah.
And concrete, they would have started using concrete right about like 10, 20 years before 1900. So that would have been, it would have been a new material. They might have been trying some things out.
And another interesting observation I made, in my basement, there's a bump out, has 3 windows at the basement level. And I just never thought about it, but windows at the ground floor and above, the milled part of the sash is on the inside, and the putty part is on the outside.
Right. Yeah, that's typical.
But at these basement windows, it was reversed.
I wonder if somebody installed them backwards.
Well, I talked to my son. I think he said his basement windows were the same way.
Really?
So,
I'll have to look at ours. Yeah.
So I took them out and I turned them around. So,
I wonder, and no, I don't think that would make that much of a difference. I was thinking it would be a security thing, but no, that wouldn't make that much of a difference. Because you can still break the glass.
Yeah, I've never.
Yeah,
out of all the windows, even in basements I've seen and done.
Yeah.
None of them were ever done that way.
Typically the profile goes to the inside and the
glazing's on
the outside. So I'm gonna start paying more attention to basement windows, and if I find another one, I'll take a picture for you.
Yeah, because
because I turned it around. I mean, it was in the basement, but I'm cleaning that area up, and it just looks a lot better to see the milled part of the sash.
Oh yeah, that's fine. And really for maintenance, it makes more sense to have the profiles on the inside because they're protected from the weather then too. Because the glazing can just be replaced easily.
Yeah. Well, in this case, they're set in from the wall far enough.
Oh, pretty far. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't get any weather.
They don't get weathered. Yeah.
And on your conversations when you were mentioning Drive It, when I was restoring the other half of this house, there's a section of bump out. I think the bump out was added, and the foundation wasn't solid, and it set a little bit, and it just seemed it was a lot of work to do much other than use Drive It.
Right.
And so that's what we did, and that's now going on 8 years and seems to be doing
yeah, the Drive It was in the 90s that they were really having issues. As long as there are weep holes in it, you should be okay.
Here's
weep holes
in the bottom so that the moisture can escape. They were having
I think this Drive It, I think they put they put some steel straps to put
Yeah.
it, hold it in place, and then screen, and then to drive it right on the screening onto the.
Yeah, that's pretty typical.
Yeah.
Where they were having trouble, and I know that there were, like, down towards Philadelphia, and even in this area, there were entire neighborhoods that, like, they were rotting pretty much from the inside out, because they didn't put weep holes in, and the drive it was right on the wood, right on the wood, and so then it was just the moisture couldn't get out, and it was just rotting the framing.
Wow, I remember that picture now. Someplace I thought it was in Millersville where they had a development.
It was a lot in the developments. It was a lot in the newer houses. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
We will, thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.